So may I, on all your behalves, call upon Nathalie Handal, all the way from New York, to talk to us about literature and goodwill, the power of words to heal. Nathalie.
Thank you so much, Papa. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. What can poetic imagination offer grief? What can it tell a nation destroyed by war? A soldier who's lost his limbs, a mother whose last image of her son has been destroyed. Her only photo left, the one in her mind. How does literature contemplate such matters? Does it have the right, or is it a duty? In what language does literature and politics speak? As writers, we are seduced by words. A demanding yet sweet solitude accompanies us. An hour can be a decade a second, in a room contemplating a single word, comma, apostrophe, but never questioning the validity of the contemplation because it's as essential as breathing. And as every letter becomes a word, words construct a sentence, sentences a paragraph, paragraphs a page, pages a chapter, chapters a book, we realize that the voyage isn't only the entire trajectory, but every word is a journey. And in understanding that, we come to realize that every one of us is part of the tapestry that makes the world. As for those whose dedication has been to literature, we know that the more the world reads, the deeper our awareness. And in understanding this, there is progress, as knowledge heals and literature rebuilds. As a passionate lover of architecture, I edited a column entitled The City and the Writer for Words Without Borders magazine. Singapore will be featured in 2015 in celebration of your Big 50. The City and the Writer features well-known writers, and also the forum is in conversation with urban planners, architects, wanderers, artists, and photographers. It's a cross-disciplinary and cross-border conversation that examines how urban life and the cityscapes create imaginative spaces, how architecture and literature considers human scale and interaction, and the way words create cities. At the Danish ambassador's apartment earlier this year, overlooking all of downtown Manhattan, where you could see the Statue of Liberty and the Brooklyn Bridge, I listened to the Bloomberg team and the urban planning guru, the Danish architect Jan Giel, speak about plans for our fair apple, New York City. At the end of the afternoon, the golden orange-red sun reflecting against the windows laced in half the apartment, I asked Jan Giel, what was the most surprising thing of your journey as an architect? He answered, architecture is form and life, the interaction between form and life, and there are few who have studied this and taken interest in this to make sure this works, because it is not architecture, this is sculpture. And most of my colleagues are much more interested in the sculpture than in life and in their interaction. But as Ralph Erskine, at the end of his life, whom I'm admired, said, what does it take to make, when I asked him, what does it take to make a good architect? He said, oh, that's simple. Architecture is about the framework of people's life. So to be a good architect, you must love people. Well, literature is also form and life, and the interaction between form and life. And it does explore and is intrigued with people and sculpting life with words. So I highly suggested to Jan Giel to petition for architects to study literature, to be good architects. After all, I told him, literature is a way into memory, as it describes cities and common experiences of human society. It's a vital resource on how we interpret and understand our surroundings. Architects aim to build ideal cities. Literature builds worlds out of ruins and houses the human spirit. I've tried with my work to build an architecture for the wanderer. Coming from Eastern and Western background and also being raised in 4 continents, I've always believed that literature can offer us spaces to dialogue to erase invisibility or fallacies. Born out of the restorative impulse to heal after 9/11 and have a dialogue about what it is to come from the East and to eradicate misconceptions and negative stereotypes of the East, I co-edited, along with Tina Shang and Ravi Shankar, the Norton Anthology, Language for a New Century, Contemporary Poetry from Southeast Asia, East Asia, Central Asia, and Middle East. A journey that took 7 years to finish and continues as we just launched our education site on how to teach the book, although we're still fine-tuning it. You can find it on languagefornewcentury.com. The book occurred in a dimensionality of its own as we, the editors, hyphenated Americans and New Yorkers, were put in touch with the far-flung poets and translators, from Nobel Prize nominee Ko Un to a Bedouin poet to esteemed poets from Singapore like Alvin Ping and Kirpal Singh, along with 11 other poets from Singapore. The journey was remarkable. The making of a documentary would have scenes of the editors cramped in one another's houses in flux of their own busy schedules, breathing, arguing, and loving poetry, a process from which the book emerged. 450 poets from 61 countries writing over 40 different languages, grouped thematically into 9 sections that work against normative taxonomy, a conversation threaded across the continents. These 9 sections, planets strung on an acoustic beat, orchestrated after countless organized drafts, left us wondering too often if we'd ever find the right steps to this dance. Editing an anthology is not for the faint of heart or the lack of stamina. You have to embody the planner and the architect, the painter and the artisan, the stonemason and the miner, singing a pixact into a slab of stone, dreaming of the grandeur in the nave of the chapel, even when challenging the minutest grammatical element in a poem translated into inefficient English. One must be a microscope and a telescope at once. It felt akin to building a symphony that, if striking a few chords, to help usher in a new era of global understanding. The power of poetry is visible throughout the East. Moments that come to mind: Tiananmen Square, 1978. Bei Dao and his poet friend Man Ki co-edited and launched the literary journal Today, which first appeared in a large character poster on the Democracy Wall in Beijing, where people originally posted their experiences of suffering during the Cultural Revolution. The journal had to be published in secret, and Bei Dao and a few other volunteers bicycled through Beijing to put up the pages, the posting of which took great courage, as it was considered politically subversive by the Chinese authorities. When the journal appeared on the wall, there was a tremendous reaction to poems and essays. There was blank spaces left after each piece of writing so that the people could write their comments and responses. In a short period of time, the magazine circulated throughout China. Bei Dao said, "The greatest danger was a matter of language. Our poetry was written in what amounted to a new language, which differed greatly from the official language to which people were accustomed. That was what the people got interested in." Most recently, Tahrir Square images of the Arab revolt in Tunisia, Libya, Egypt flashed on CNN. It was clear something extraordinary was taking place in the Arab world. There was a cry for freedom coming from within the country itself, and it was lines from an early 20th century Tunisian poet that people were chanting, quote, "To the tyrants of the world." As the Egyptians' palpable longing for freedom went across the world witnessing, we realized that the purpose of our book was being realized. Poetry in other parts of the world is as necessary to life as bus schedules and electricity. Many people from the East can recite by heart ancient hymns, and within them reside the desires of the people released into a communal space. These events demonstrated that poetry has a real world power. The gesture to introduce the voices of Asian and Arab poets to an English-speaking world has contributed, we hope, to a global awareness that is shaping into a full-blown revolution. Speaking a language for the new century will be inherently humanistic. It will be polyglot, spoken in many tongues around the world where Asia and the Middle East are growing in wealth and cultural influence. Poetry is not a transactional language, but one that values subjectivity. And it is there we can begin to emphasize with those we share the planet, with those with whom we wish to share the same peace and prosperity. Caroline Forche speaks of the poetry of witness, poetry as evidence of life and politics, of war and atrocities, evidence that language is a living pulse. It breathes, echoes, and touches, evidence that it can begin a conversation, that it can lead us to spaces where we can manifest tolerance and justice, where we can learn to listen to what we imagine separates us but doesn't, what we think divides us but doesn't. We too often forget that the personal is a fundamental dimension of the global. When I was 9 years old, as the Caribbean sun descended, the tropical heat cooled down and evening approached, I saw my caretaker on a low wooden hay chair, her legs bent, her knees at the level of her chest, her arms on her legs, her head down. She seemed consumed by a single thought. I didn't know it at the time, but that look in her face was one I would keep seeing in women I crossed. Women who spent their lives working hard without ever receiving any compensation or relief. I went towards her and asked her if she was fine. She smiled slightly. She always told me African and Caribbean folk tales, so I instinctively started telling her a story. She smiled. Soon that smile became laughter. Her entire spirit responded with amusement to the story. I can't tell you what I recounted. I wasn't aware that at that moment I was creating a story. Years later, I saw that same look on her face, except this time she seemed paralyzed. She explained that she dreamed her daughter would educate herself, become a professional, leave poverty, but got pregnant instead and was unmarried. She had sacrificed everything for her daughter. This left her with a profound regret. The kind that tears the soul apart. I held her hand. She knew I was grieving too. As I'd recently returned from the Middle East, where I lost a friend during one of the endless clashes. Suddenly, she asked me if I remembered that story I told her that day years ago, when we were both entranced in a feverish spell of storyteller. I, the teller, her, the listener. Her entire demeanor changed, and as if she didn't have a care in the world, she began telling me the story I had once told her. I didn't remember a word. She apparently remembered every one. The story had become its own event. Language had transformed our psyche and our trauma. And what of the uncertain corridors of memory? How does remembrance and forgetfulness accompany and literature as a healing agent? Should we remember to forget? As Mahmoud Darwish tells us in the book by Beirut War, Memory for Forgetfulness. I've been obsessed with history since I was young because I came from these such different cultures, West and East, where each had a version of the same history. Who should I believe? Both? Neither? In my early 20s, while in Bethlehem, the Holy Land, looking for answers about this torn city, this town that everyone knows in religious texts and that I knew through traditions. I wanted to understand why such a land was stained with so much blood. While walking on Star Street in the old city one day, a relative, and bear in mind that everyone's a relative there, insisted I come to the rooftop to see his garden. Indeed, it was enchanting as he grew thyme and basilica and mint, and he even raised pigeons. All this while on a rooftop overlooking Bethlehem, in the distance, the valley leading to the Dead Sea. I learned later that his house was one of the oldest and most extraordinary examples of 19th century architecture in Bethlehem. But the reason he really wanted me to come to the rooftop was to read me his poem, loosely translated. He writes, he played an invisible oud. His fingers moved as if the instrument was on his leg. He kept his eyes shut as if opening them would make him disappear. He stopped, collapsed into the cold cement of a cell we'd shared for years. I didn't move. I knew he needed death more than he needed me. And the song he composed echoed through the entire jail, but the silence of the other side was louder than the music. And one heard, and no one heard. Everyone heard. The moon took his body. I laid my head on the bed, imagining but he will tell me tomorrow. Who was he, I asked. My friend, he said. His wife appeared. Seeing me stunned, she said, don't listen to him. We don't know what exactly happened. Did it really occur? And if it did, it was the only recording of this man's death. His poem, with its small, disturbing detail, was the sole account we have. If it wasn't true, did it matter? It moved me deeply, and for the first time I thought of death as a form of freedom. And although it wasn't the answer to my original question of land and blood, it gave me another insight, one on love. And it made me realize that there isn't a nation smaller than its dream, which reminded me of the moment Nelson Mandela, and I still shiver hearing his serene voice, said, I quote, in the dark days when all seemed hopeless in our country, when men refused to hear her resonant voice, she took her own life. She was both an Afrikaner and an African. Her name is Ingrid Jonker. She wrote, and I quote, the child is not dead, not in Lunga nor in Nyanga, not in Orlando nor in Sharpeville, not at the police post at Philippine, where he lies with a bullet through his brain. The child, who only wanted to play in the sun in Nyanga, is everywhere. The child grown to a man treks through all Africa. The child grown to a giant journeys over the world without a pass. That the poem, The Man on the Rooftop Road, seemed to have healed him of his friend's death or another undisclosed ache. What truth matters most? What is truth? Is what I'm telling you true? After all, as Marilyn Robinson writes in Housekeeping, fact explains nothing. On the contrary, it is fact that requires explanation. That evening, I thought about how I grew up with shelves and shelves of books about the Holy Land, but felt the need to go there to understand it. And my cousin, who grew up there in the house I slept in, didn't have a single book on the Holy Land, as it was forbidden. When he went to study in France, he searched for every book he could find about the place he grew up in. He needed to read them all. It is language he went to for healing. As we have gone to Pablo Neruda for the language of love and murmurs of the heart, to Chinua Achebe for the ancient language of conflict between the individual and society, for Michael Ondaatje for the language of fable and fact, to Rumi for the language of transcendence, the spirit, and of light, to Lorca for lyric and the language of possibility. My latest book, Poet in Andalusia, is a recreation of Lorca's journey in reverse from Poet in New York. I wanted to explore Lorca's Andalusia, a place where racial, ethnic, and religious forces converge and contend, where Islamic, Judaic, and Christian traditions remain a mirror of a past that is terrible and beautiful. Maybe there I would find answers about convivencia, or coexistence. I'm not sure if I did, but Lorca said, lo que más me importa es vivir. On this journey I discovered peace is there if we want to find it, because as was true for Lorca, what people want most is to live. When the Palestinian writer Mahmoud Darwish died in Texas in 2008, I went to Allen Ginsberg. The beads have influenced people all over the globe, and I had a small intimate moment with Mr. Ginsberg. I interviewed him for Darwish's journal Al-Carmel in 1997. The interview took place at a crucial moment, as you will see. I didn't revisit that interview until almost a decade later with the death of Darwish. I began writing a poem entitled After Kaddish, and I excerpt from my conversation with Ginsberg in it, After Kaddish. It's all about God, always about God, but no one sees the fountain. You weren't well, I know. You spoke to me because you liked Mahmoud, I know. You wanted to postpone. I wanted to postpone. I was nervous. Your assistant said, don't. You died a month later. I kept your keys. The poem you wrote the night before we spoke. Your words, both. I got up in the middle of the night and wrote a poem. It was a thought that had occurred to me over and over again. And I had never written it down because I was ashamed of it. It is a fantasy about my funeral. The main thing is, beside my family, is that everybody I have ever made love through is still alive. Hundreds of older guys and boys, old by now and married with children. I was always ashamed of this fantasy. Fame and death are something. Afraid to reveal that sort of vanity. So last time I realized, yes, it was vanity. But so what? You take your neurosis and make your pet out of it. The whole point is to reveal your mind, not to be ashamed of your mind. It's not me, it is my mind, or whatever. I wrote it down, and it is probably the title of my next book. I will put it out. Fame and death. End of quote. That's what we leave behind, the way we went. I suppose there is a time to see the window. Can literature heal? Literature transforms. Extremity is born out of simplification. Literature resists that. It will be our constellation. It will be satirical and ardent. It will speak the language of the common man and that of the literary privilege. It will be absurdity and high resolution pixels of the heart. It will be blasphemous. It will bless. It will entrance and interlace. And it will construct the borders in our mind, deconstruct the borders in our minds, because nature is an open paradise for all. We are reminded of that in the words of the Norwegian adventurer Thor Heyerdahl, one of the history's most famous voyagers in the Kon-Tiki. He writes, "Borders, I have never seen one, but I have heard they exist in the minds of some people." Literature plays an integral role in eliminating these frontiers, in bridging differences and healing. Haruki Murakami in Norwegian Wood writes, "What happens when people open their hearts? They get better." For those we didn't get to on time, I say, we could not save you, but listen anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathalie. What a powerful reminder of the force of language and the power of words and the emotions that I hold. Hearing Nathalie talk about her experience in Bethlehem, I couldn't help but recall that exactly a week ago today, I was in the house of the Israeli ambassador to Singapore, and I had been given the special honor of reading 3 pages of David Grossman's novel, To the End of the Land. And David, when he spoke and read from his book in Hebrew, talked about this anguish and the agony. We know that David's own son was killed by a Palestinian terrorist, and yet David said, "I am more concerned about how the young of Palestine and Israel unite for a better future together than to keep remembering the bad that was done." It's a powerful reminder of these things. And another sentiment Nathalie that echoed as you were speaking came to me about 30 years ago from Taban de Leon. I think very few in the room may know this poet. Taban, African, and I was telling him, I said, Africa is going to get its act together because all your African countries are, steeped in very bad things, broadly known as corruption. And he wrote me just 2 lines. "Dear brother," he said, "how does one apologize for one's country without losing face?" Very powerful. Made me ashamed of my rebuke and made me think and reflect about my own nation and my own country. So thank you very much for that. I think as we move forward, this is going to be exciting. I was thinking that I should interrupt the flow and actually take a minute or 2 to refill glasses and all that, but I think it might be better to just carry on. So if it's okay, we've got 2 readers for this evening.